What's poppin', y'all? It's your boy Pee Wee the Plug. Welcome back to NBA Weekly. In this episode, we are going to begin our top 10 rankings at each position. This is always something that's fun to do, something that can be chaotic, controversial. A lot of opinions around these topics and these lists whenever the season is approaching. A couple of things to point out about my particular list and rankings. I went in and did all my own research and studying about different lineup combinations to determine and define particular positions to each player. A lot of different websites and places have guys listed at positions all across the board. One website or platform may have a guy as a small forward. Another platform or website may have a guy as a power forward. And one website may have a guy as a shooting guard. The other one may have him as a point guard. So for me, I dove in for all 30 teams, looked at their different combinations of lineups, and I determined what position each player played based on that. Secondly, guys who did not play at least half the season do not qualify to make my list. So there's going to be a lot of highly big names that will not be mentioned. Damian Lillard, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, Kawhi, Paul George. A lot of guys played less than 41 games. And the last but most important thing that a lot of people always get confused with these lists, everything is based off last year going into this year. So it doesn't matter how many MVPs a player won. It doesn't matter how many all-star appearances or all-NBA appearances they have in their career, because what you did in your career does not determine your ranking for this year going into the season. So keep that in mind. I know a lot of people cannot grasp that for some reason, but they'll see a player that they're used to seeing as a top 3 guy year in and year out. Last year was a down year for him. He might be at 7 or 6, and now people are like, wait, how is he at 7 or 6? He's been in an All-Star game 11 times. In 2017, he did this. It's based off last year. I cannot stress that enough, but every year we have this problem. So keep that in mind. And then also for the people that don't understand the most important thing, everybody can't make lists. You know what I mean? There's only 10 spots, and we have such a talented pool of players in our league that somebody's going to be, left off the list. So it's going to be some good players or some talented players that don't make the list. That's not me hating. That's not me being asleep. That's me being fully aware, knowing that there's only 10 spots in a league that has at least 15 qualified players at each position to be able to make a list like this. But without further ado, let's dive in. Let's get it. Starting off at number 10, we have Lamelo Ball. This was very tough for me because the last spot, the 10th spot, I had 3 different options. We had Lamelo Ball, we had De'Aaron Fox, and we also had Fred VanVleet. And if you ask me, or hopefully a lot of other people, all of these guys had tremendous years last year. But ultimately, I went with Lamelo Ball, finally cracked the 20 points per game mark that we knew he would prime, in the second or third year to get. I think everything went up, the rebounds, the assist numbers, but most importantly for me, it was the perimeter shooting. The attempts went up, the makes and the percentages went up, and I think that was a very underrated part of LaMelo's year. He shot the ball extremely well, and when you consider the fact that Charlotte doesn't have the most spacing in the perimeter and the type of quality of looks he got and his openness, they weren't the best, but he was still able to make three-point shots in a lot of different ways, whether it was off the dribble, in the corners, off the catch. And I think that adds value to LaMelo as an overall point guard. And it puts Charlotte in an interesting position as far as how they're going to construct this roster for the future with LaMelo. Obviously, there's no Miles Bridges, so that's going to create a big hole in this team in the upcoming year. And I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on LaMelo. And it's going to be interesting to see how he bounces back and to see if he's going to be able to duplicate last year and solidify himself again next year as a top 10 player. He definitely had a top 10 point guard. He definitely had not the most help, but I think he had a little bit better continuity than De'Aaron Fox, but a lot less talent than Fred VanVleet. So for him this season, he could definitely see himself in a position where the talent drops off a lot depending on what Charlotte does. They could be a team that sells Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier, and puts LaMelo in a position where he's playing with a lot younger talent and a lot less qualified or experienced guys in the league. So I love the defensive versatility. I want to see him take on more of a defensive challenge. When you look at the stats, it says that he's guarding a lot of secondary playmakers, a lot of guys who are second in usage or around fourth for usage. I want to see him take on that main guy, meaning if they're playing the Kings, I want to see him take on that challenge of guarding De'Aaron Fox. Or I want to see him take on that challenge of at least trying to guard Trey Young. And I think that's the next step for him, along with the obvious, points going up and picking up some of the slack for missing Miles Bridges. But overall, all-star year for Lamelo. A lot of great, exciting performances. And I don't think Charlotte is in the play-in or even close to the play-in without him. The defensive versatility, the improving in shot making, the off-the-charge playmaking, the size, he scratches off a lot of boxes. And I consider him a top 10 point guard. At 9, we have a guy that's probably not going to be on this list next year. He probably won't qualify due to position change and whatever, but Dejounte Murray, obviously acquired by the Atlanta Hawks, which is going to put him in a position to probably play a lot more shooting guard versus point guard and in backcourt with Trey Young. Dejounte had an incredible year. Took the Spurs to the play-in, dragged them through the Western Conference for a long time. I don't even think I was considering them. They made that late spark, but he had a lot of major and big performances, giving you 21, almost 22 points a game, with 9 rebounds, almost 9 assists, really stuffing the stat sheet. You pair that with his defensive prowess, and how good he's able to be on the defensive side of the basketball, and you have yourself a fully, impactful player. The one impressive thing was the fact that the Spurs didn't really have any standout talent this year outside of him, right? So there was no DeMar DeRozan to lean on or anyone around that level. It was a lot of young talent, youthful, and he was able to make it work and hit a lot of big shots, dangerous mid-range killer. I will say, though, like LaMelo, Dejounte Murray is going to have pressure this year to show, number one, if he's going to be solidified as a top 10 player in his position, but also, is he going to be able to be impactful? Because when you talk about Dejounte Murray, there's a couple of ways and a couple of different perspectives that people have. People tip their hats off to the offensive, box score numbers that he had and the stats that he were able to put up. People also take into consideration the fact that there was really nobody on the Spurs to challenge that. Now him going to Atlanta, sharing some of this responsibility with Trey Young and just being on an overall more talented team with DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, Clint Capella, Okongwu, Bogdanovich. There's a lot more options there. So Dejounte is in a space where he's going to have to continue to show his impact and his value with maybe less opportunity to have the same type of numbers. So it's going to be extremely interesting to see if he can match that or if he keeps it up, because that would be even more impressive. If Dejounte Murray is able to replicate the same type of year on a team with even more talent, I think that boosts him up. The Hawks go up to a whole different level, and that's what they're bringing him in for. So I'm watching Dejounte Murray a lot, and I'm trying to figure out, is this a byproduct of not having anyone around you and having your own team? Or is this truly who you is, and did you develop into a new stratosphere that nobody kind of projected you to be at? So this upcoming year is going to be extremely impactful for him, and I can't wait to see the way it goes. At number 8, this is a guy that I love to bring up because I think box score numbers don't necessarily do him justice, though they don't hurt him at all. I just feel like his impact is way more beyond a stat sheet, and that's Jrue Holiday. Jrue Holiday is exactly the type of point I was making about Dejounte Murray going to the Hawks. Because of who Jrue Holiday plays with in Milwaukee, he doesn't have the opportunity to really do anything crazy from a statistical standpoint, right? Being next to Greek Freak, he's going to shoulder a lot of the offensive responsibility. He's going to control the basketball for a lot. He's going to do a lot of different things. And then also you have Chris Middleton, who is kind of the picture-perfect sidekick to Greek Freak and kind of compliments him a lot. So now that puts Jrue Holiday in a position to kind of get in where he fits in throughout the course of the game, but also making sure that his impact is being felt beyond numbers and box scores. So the defense that he brings is always second to none. We know exactly what he does from a defensive standpoint and the value he has on the Milwaukee Bucks as a defensive player. But I just think that his level of just solidness, just being solid, is truly underrated. He's not giving you anything that's bad. You know what I mean? 8, 6, 8, 5, and 7 is not bad by any means. He's not giving you anything bad as far as the stats. 18, 5, and 7 is not bad at all, especially when you consider the 50% from the field, 40% from 3. Got to get that free throw number up. But it's just the fact that some others on this list are going to score more, they probably assist more, and they probably shoot the basketball more. But Drew Holiday has found a way to remain consistent in a role that changes a lot depending on the night or depending on the opposition. And I think that's something that's truly underrated. And I think that's why Milwaukee is such a great team. And to me, if Chris Middleton was healthy at all against that Celtics team, I think the Bucks ultimately are in the finals again for a second year, and they're playing against the Warriors trying to go back to back. Drew Holiday is that important, and I love players like this because we've created such a culture that just glorifies basketball reference and plain black and white stats, which, a guy like him shows that points per game, assists, and rebounds doesn't do his impact justice. And I think more players should try to figure out how to be valuable when you don't have everything revolving around you. So Drew Holiday, 8, Mr. Solid, Mr. Reliable. I wouldn't be surprised if he was able to go up a couple notches in the next upcoming year. But he's definitely a guy that I love to talk about when we mention the word impact and value. At 7, we got the man, the myth, the point guard, Chris Paul. Again, similar to Drew Holiday, a veteran point guard, a veteran floor leader that doesn't really need to do all of the whole numbers thing anymore at this point in his career. He's done that before. At this point, he's just trying to win, keep his guys organized, get them in spots that's going to put them in position to be most successful. We're seeing Devin Booker ascend to being the top, one of the best shooting guards in the league next to Chris Paul. DeAndre Ayton has made strides, still has some more strides to go, but it's definitely, you can see the difference of having Chris Paul versus not having Chris Paul. Mikal Bridges has solidified himself as a 3-and-D wing. Same thing with Cameron Johnson. And then late in the game, they have that option to control the game, control the pace, and again, put the team in the best situation to win games. And that's why the Phoenix Suns were the best team in basketball by far. Now, obviously, the way that the season ended was not the best look, and it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. When you talk about the Suns or anybody regarding the Suns, that's what everybody brings up. But I still think you have to consider Chris Paul one of the top 10 point guards based on what he did and what he's doing. This is the second time in his career where he's showing that having a floor general and a guy that is just smart beyond the X's and O's is a lot more valuable than people think. It ain't always about trying to acquire a 25-point score or somebody that's putting up the craziest numbers, but just somebody who knows the ins and outs about pace, control, tempo, organization, organizing teams, best spots, and just really doing the due diligence. It takes you a long way. The Thunder traded Russell Westbrook, acquired Chris Paul. We all thought it was going to be a little shelfier for the Thunder, and Chris Paul was just going to ride that year out. Nah, Thunder made the playoffs with a young Shea. Gallinari played well. Schroeder played well. Very good year for them. Same thing here with Phoenix. We knew Phoenix was good because of the bubble and just the strides that they were taking that year while missing Aiden for 25 games or so. But the difference in having a Ricky Rubio, solid veteran point guard, to having a point guard like Chris Paul means forget just making the playoffs, which was the goal for the Suns. They had a finals run. And then they came back, duplicated the same type of year, and were the best team in the NBA, except they needed some things to clean up on. Hopefully they can make those adjustments so they can return to the finals and have that same type of run, because the expectations is kind of finals or bust for them. But as long as they have Chris Paul with the young core that they have, I think they put themselves in a conversation to make some type of noise throughout the playoffs. Again, like Drew Holiday, beyond a box score is the impact and the value of Chris Paul. And I think at the point guard position, when you talk about those two, that means a lot. That's exactly what the point guard position is about. Yeah, putting up numbers is always sexy, especially when you're putting up crazy major numbers. But the impact and winning is how you value a point guard, and I think Chris Paul does that a lot. Next for me is a guy that's usually a lot higher in a lot of lists, normally in a different position as well. But James Harden being at 6 is extremely low for what we are used to seeing, for sure. I'm expecting off top James Harden to be a lot higher in the next year's list. with a full year under his belt with the Philadelphia 76ers, a full year of being healthy, a full offseason of being able to work out and work on his game. I'm seeing a lot of James Harden on my timeline as we speak. It's making me expect a major bounce back year for him. But based off last year, we had a very down year for James Harden, considering who James Harden is. But even with a down year, he's still a top 6 point guard in this league, in my opinion. I think that the scoring is one part of James Harden. Even when that takes a hit, his facilitating is still so head and shoulders above the rest of the league. And I think that's a very underrated part of his game. Always been a very underrated part of his game. And I love the fact that he's in a position to really put that on full display and now make scoring a secondary option. When you have Joel Embiid in the pick and roll with you, you have Tyrese Maxey, who's catch and shoot is incredible. It puts you in a position of being James Harden to prioritize getting those guys involved and looking for your shot in a secondary way. So I expect him to have a major year. Still stuffed the stat sheet last year, though the shooting splits were a little bit disappointing and a little down for him. To be able to still give you 22, 8, and 10 is still very impressive. And I think, again, with a fully healthy year, a full year under his belt with the Philadelphia 76ers, we could easily see James Harden getting back to being a 25-point scorer, still giving you around 7 to 8 rebounds, and he can maybe even give you 10 to 11 assists this year, and he could be a very, very key figure that to keep an eye on to lead the league in assists. So I'm expecting something crazy from James Harden. I have him as a dark horse MVP on my list, but based off of last year and everything that went around with the drama of Brooklyn getting to Philadelphia, having some of the tough shooting nights that he had and some of the tough performances, I can only put him at 6 for now. But I'm definitely putting an asterisk there for all of those things considered and expecting a huge bounce back year for him and for Philadelphia to position themselves as a favorite to potentially make the finals to compete for a championship. Entering the top 5, Darius Garland. I mean, what a year for this guy. I'm truly sad and disappointed that the injuries piled up on the Cavaliers as much as they did at the end of the year, because they were one of the best stories, kind of like my Knicks in the previous year. Just a nice story. They went a different route, gave us a lot of size instead of doing the small ball perimeter-centric thing, and Darius Garland was the engine for them. 22 and 8. Incredible shooting splits. And I think he really turned that corner and turned that page into being one of the best floor generals in the game. He reminds me of a young Chris Paul when you talk about the pick and roll game, being able to pass, make the proper reads, but also make himself effective as a scorer. You have to worry about Darius Garland coming off that screen as a scorer as much as you do as a passer. And I think that dual threat right there puts a lot of defenses in a position to really have to pick their poison. You fully commit to Darius Garland, there's not many passes that he can't make. And if you are scared of the pass, it's not really many shots or ways to score that he can. He can hit you with a floater. He can shoot the 3 with range, step back off the dribble. And then when he gets inside the paint, it gets even deeper of, is he floating? Is he throwing a lob? When you talk about Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, and I love the shooting that they added, you know what I mean, with Ochai Agbaji. Karis LeVert is back. You know what I mean? Larry Markkinen shot the ball extremely good, and it looks like Colin Sexton will be back. So I think the Cavs are going to position themselves to have another interesting and fun year. But I think the level that they go to will definitely require Evan Mobley to take a second step. But it's going to revolve a lot around the engine and Darius Garland and seeing how he continues to take his game to new heights. He's entering that top point guard conversation before our eyes. And I think he's giving some of those top guys like Ja, Trey a run for their money. And if those guys get too complacent, I wouldn't be surprised to see Darius Garland take somebody's spot. Again, he reminds me so much of a young New Orleans Chris Paul point guard. And I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years he steals an MVP award out of nowhere. So watch out for Darius Garland. At number 4, here we go. This is the meat and the potatoes. It's the main show. This was everybody's waiting for. I think everybody knew what the top 4 was going to be. Everybody's just curious in the order. It's a couple guys on here that have extreme fan bases. It's 2 guys in particular that always rival each other, and I love the rivalry, of course. But at number 4, we got Ja Morant. Ja Morant had an incredible year. He gave us, 27 and 7 a night, 49% Field goal percentage, one of the best finishers at the point guard position in the league. The Memphis Grizzlies had an incredible year, and it was good seeing them have that meteoric rise. You know what I mean? They rose to the top extremely fast, and overnight it felt like. And the same thing with Ja and his superstardom. You know what I mean? I think we were all anticipating it to happen, but I think it happened a lot sooner than we may have thought. And I love his game. I love the excitement and the flair in the highlight reels. But I will say, I think a lot of people value the highlights more than the actual point guard play. And I think in comparison to one of his counterparts that he's rivaled against, he's not there yet to me. Another thing that I took in consideration to have him on at 4, which might be low to some people coming off the year that he had, is the fact that Memphis' success isn't predicated to just him. You know what I mean? It isn't like he's carrying Memphis to the success that they had, because we saw a large portion of the season without him, and Tyus Jones came in, and the Memphis Grizzlies didn't really miss a beat. So I'm interested to see how Ja tops himself from last year, and if he's going to be able to get deeper into that MVP conversation. And is there going to be moments where we see him and say, "Oh, the Memphis Grizzlies aren't as good without him"? It can't hurt him too much that his team is good. That's not his problem. That's what he should want. But in comparison to a guy that we're going to get to next, I think that there is still a little bit more that I prefer with the other guy. At number 3, we got the guy that I was talking about that rivals Ja, and that's Trey Morant. At number 3, we got Trey Young, the guy that I was alluding to that goes against Ja, and that's his counterpart rival. I just think that Trey Young plays the point guard position a little better than Ja Morant. As far as last year, I'll take Trey Morant. Why do I keep saying Trey Morant? Trey Young, to me, had a phenomenal year. I don't think his team success was the way that a lot of us wanted, but I mean, for him to go out and average around 28 and 10 on any given night, shot the ball really well, in love with his floater game and how he dictates the pace of the game for his team. They obviously went out and made a big acquisition in Dejounte Murray to try to give him some help and for this team to get better, because they did make the Eastern Conference Finals. So last year was a bit of disappointment. But the difference between Ja and Trey is I think Trey just does a lot more as far as being the engine for his team. And it's no slight at Ja, because they are neck and neck for sure. It's comparing apples and oranges at this point. But I love the passing in particular with Trey Young. I think he doesn't get enough credit as a passer because everybody loves the shots and the scoring and how far he shoots. But I think his passing has always been probably my favorite trait. And that's why I always called him MVP qualities and talked about how he comes from the Steve Nash and the Steph Curry fabric of not necessarily being just like them, but he has a mixture in some of the similarities that they both have. I love the pick and roll play like Steve Nash. I love the shooting ability and shooting aggression like Steph Curry, though he's an extremely different shooter than him. It's just the point that he has the gravity to be able to make the pick and roll with him a lot more dangerous. And I think when you compare the teams, Jaren Jackson had a better year than John Collins last year. Desmond Bane was a better player than DeAndre Hunter last year. And I think if we can get Trey Young's counterparts, not his counterpart, but if we can get his teammates and his core around him to step up and make the strides that a lot of the Memphis core made, I think Atlanta could easily jump right back into the conversation of being at the top of the East and, Eastern Conference Finals appearances and things like that. They're not that far away. I just think that they are depending on some guys to take some strides in the right direction to give Trey Young a little bit more help than he had. At number 2, it's a guy who had an incredible run, displayed a lot of greatness in the playoffs, answered a lot of questions. Why was there even questions at this point in his career? Beyond me. But Steph Curry, 25 and a half per night, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 44% from the field, 38% from 3, 92% from the free throw line. I said all of that to say that, like Jrue Holiday and like Chris Paul, his numbers just don't do him justice. Me counting off his box score numbers does not feel like I really went over the impact that Steph Curry has. And that's one of the best things about him, is even when his numbers are as great as they are, he's just beyond that box score. The gravity, what he means to the offense that the Warriors run, the constant moving, you know what I mean? Just the big shot making. He's one of the most selfless stars in the game as well. And I think this last playoff run was truly a sight to see. For him to finally get that Finals MVP, as silly as that is, but for him to win another ring without Kevin Durant, in the tough Western Conference against such a historic defense like Boston, it shows really the greatness. That was a defense we talked about for almost all of the playoffs, of how historic and how great this defense was. And at certain times, Steph Curry made it look silly. He is that good. And the fact that I even have him number 2 might sound crazy to some people as well. And I won't be surprised if I get a lot of comments like, man, how is Steph number 2? We'll get to the number 1 guy. But I can't believe how he's still playing at this level and how he's still surprising us at this point. And I'm truly excited to see this upcoming year and see if he's going to put himself back in that MVP conversation, because the Warriors are going to be good again. The West is going to be open again. And there is not some clear-cut favorite to be the MVP. And you can find narratives out there for Steph Curry to win another MVP. And if he does, at this point, anything extra that he does, we're going to have to consider, where he is, not just in point guard rankings of all time, but like player rankings. I see a lot of conversations that, he's a top this point guard, he's a top that point guard. Where he sits in the rankings of all-time players, it's a conversation worth having, especially when you see the fact that he or the Warriors ain't in any position to slow down. So I have Steph Curry as number 2. I really don't even know what to say to really describe him for being. I just feel like a lot of Steph Curry shit really speaks for itself. And anytime I try to find justice or praise to give him, it just feels like it's not even as justified or as great as it should be. So Steph Curry, number 2. To end the list and to end the rankings, the number 1 point guard heading into this season is Luka Doncic. I mean, this dude is at another level. Luka is a guy that's giving you damn near a 30-point triple-double on a nightly basis. He is the driving force for this Dallas Maverick team. I love what Jason Kidd was able to do for them defensively. I love the fact that they were able to go out and get a guy like Christian Wood. Yeah, you lose Jalen Brunson, but I think, getting Tim Hardaway Jr. back, you still have Spencer Dinwiddie, Reggie Bullock, and what he was able to do as a catch-and-shoot 3-and-D guy, Dorian Finney-Smith. I think there's still enough options there, and Luka makes this team so dangerous. It's mind-blowing that we mention some of the names we mentioned when we talk about the Dallas Mavericks, because I think if you put a lot of other players on this team, I don't know if we talk about Dallas the same way. I don't know if Dallas goes to the Western Conference Finals. I don't know if Dallas takes out Phoenix, if there is another player leading this team other than Luka Doncic. The shot-making ability, the shot creation, the amount of attention that he creates for himself to create plays and looks for others on his team is just beyond it's beyond anything we've seen in a while, and it's so refreshing. And I know it's a lot of conversations about heliocentric offenses and whether they produce winning basketball, but the fact that Luka and the Mavericks is making it work, I think speaks a lot on his greatness. And any year now, I'm expecting him to win the MVP. The last couple of years I've had him as one of my picks. He hasn't won it yet. But I think it's coming very soon, and it may be this year. I really do think the Dallas Mavericks are a team that got drastically better this offseason, and Luka seems to be slimmer and in shape more, and I think he's just dangerous. And outside of the NBA, anytime I see this dude hoop, he's killing it. Whether it's in FIBA games, representing his country, all-star games, wherever, Luka Doncic comes to play. And I really love his game because he's not a guy with a 45-inch vertical. He's not this, this super built guy. He's just a very good, skilled basketball player. And even when you play good defense on this dude, he's hard to stop. So that's why I have him as my number 1 point guard. And I expect for him to have damn near the same type of numbers, almost close to a 30-point triple-double on some very big moments. Game winners, step backs, all of that. He's going to give you the full package of what you want from the best point guard in the game. And that's going to wrap up my list, man. Appreciate everybody watching. I cannot wait to see all of the thoughts and opinions that are in the comments from all these different fans of different teams. I know it's going to be a lot of things y'all don't agree with and that y'all disagree with. But again, I always open up my comments for disagreements. Let me know what you agree with, what you don't like, what you do like, what you disagree with, and hopefully we can have some back and forth in the comments. I appreciate you guys as always. This is NBA Weekly. I'm Pee Wee the Plug, and this is my top 10 point guards entering the upcoming NBA year. Appreciate y'all. I'm out. Peace.